Grind!
In my last excursion into the world of quote-unquote punks, we went over the varied worlds of diesel punk, a favorite subgenre of mine, even though I did entirely forget about some important examples. But I am setting out yet again to find another wonderful genre of punk to get into. If you've missed the video before this one, find it right here. And before we start, let's go over a few things. Punk, as a genre, is often around the counterculture of a specific time period. Steampunk is counter to the culture of pre-World War England, diesel punk is a post-World War commentary, atom punk often relates to the Cold War with events like the Cuban Missile Crisis framing the scene, and cyberpunk is often a counter to the hype-hop era of the 80s, essentially corporate warfare. So for the title of this video, what does biopunk counter? What is the punk of this subgenre actually being a punk against? For the most part, it remains as a kind of offshoot from cyberpunk, with autocratic and corrupt governments working along with dastardly corporations to misuse and misappropriate bioengineering. And for what biopunk itself is, think cyberpunk, but instead of replacing your body parts with feeble machines that can be hacked, outdated, and fail, replace them with constantly evolving, genetically perfect duplicates. Raw, real organs. Replace the old with the new, and keep the flesh rot with the truth of life devoid of the mechanical lies that we see in metal. A few examples. Right off the bat you have Prototype, Resident Evil, Scorn, and even something like Sony's Edge, an episode from Love, Death, and Robots that could fall right into this. Organs that can be replaced, body parts made anew, genetic modifications turning an average person into an armored being of war. Prototype, where our main character is altered by a virus that allows him to consume biomass and ruthlessly alter the limbs of his body to be used against his enemies, as well as taking the form of others as he chews through them. Resident Evil, much more famously with the Umbrella Corps' various viruses, all bioengineered superweapons that wrought massive destruction on the innocent lives of Raccoon City and millions more across the globe. Some creatures, like the Nemesis, infected by the T-virus and sent on a rampant path of extreme evolution by these events. Sony's Edge puts us in a world of modified creatures, people genetically altered by unnatural means, and beasts that have been linked to a pilot of sorts. And if you remember our deep dive on the Hive, Zerg, and Tyranids in the Warhammer v Destiny video, all three of these factions fit neatly into the biopunk style of technology and direction too. While the worlds they're a part of are not, the mixture of complex machinery and gross biology used for war would do perfectly in a biopunk world. As the Tyranids of Warhammer are not many species working together as you would imagine teamwork to be, they possess a type of advanced biotechnology that allows them to form ships, weapons, and everything they need to conquer the galaxy and consume all life with nothing but the bodies of living matter. Every gun is a separate creature melded and forced onto its host, a symbiotic, sometimes parasitic relationship that makes the Tyranids not working together, but literally becoming extensions of one another. It is impossible to tell where one Tyranid ends and where another begins, this grotesque relationship shaping their force of rapidly adaptive creatures that can evolve to persist in every environment against any enemy, so much so that it's not impossible to be able to document each and every variation of Tyranid, as they are practically unlimited in their possibility of form.
What is it?
That is one of our first successful hybrids.
Not every story that features biomechanical engineering could be considered biopunk, but you can totally make an argument for the things that do. The FEV virus and other genetic experiments tied to craft perfect monsters in Fallout. Obviously, Fallout itself is not biopunk, but these elements are certainly reminiscent of it. The super soldiers of Gears of War, the Locusts who are born of genetic experiments and designed to be a species that could never be defeated, even evolving past extinction? It is close, but I wouldn't call it biopunk just quite. Like with Fallout, just because something features genetic modification does not make it biopunk. Think of Star Wars. This is a space opera fantasy story. It has genetic clones, cybernetic body parts, and more, but you wouldn't call Star Wars Cyberpunk or Biopunk. Other examples, like that one wild horror movie about an incestuous squirrel baby, Splice? If not Biopunk, it at least gives me the heebie-jeebies, and I hope reminding you of it does the same. One of the strongest through lines of Biopunk is specifically the focus on viscera, on the body horror of inhumane experiments and unconditional agony of the people within these realms. Have you ever read I Have No Mouth But I Must Scream? Or at least watched the Wendigoon video on it? Think of that, but like everybody, everyone, everywhere. The kind of perverted concept of a skewed scientific reality but blended with the corporate walkdown of cyberpunk. You're not worried about insurance because the EMTs are going to ignore you. You're worried about insurance because if you miss a payment, they'll be turning off, if not trying to repo, your own kidneys. A world where the very limbs of your body can be retained and perfectly replicated as if they were brand new, but all the same being mended into a wall of unfathomable flesh is not out of the question. In the last video, Biopunk was probably the most talked about subgenre of punk in the comments. I can see why. Some of this stuff is just, it's pretty horrifying, but in the good kind of way. Minor spoilers, but as someone who's never really played the Resident Evil titles, the RE8 baby is instant nightmare fuel for a reason. The two biggest examples of biopunk I've taken specific interest in for this video, however, are already fairly popular. The first, and the one you've likely seen images from, is All Tomorrows, a billion-year chronicle of the myriad species and mixed fortunes of man from 2006. This work of science fiction and speculative evolution written and illustrated by the Turkish artist C.M. Kozman is a fabulous single-sitting read with images that are both perturbing and intriguing for the reader. If you are worried about spoilers, I will be only briefly laying out the main spark notes of the story's narrative. It's totally free to read online and will be linked in the description. I totally recommend reading it, if not just for the disturbingly creative scientific pictures throughout the story that will penetrate your nightmares faster than Jeff the Killer. This, if you haven't seen before and couldn't get it from the title, is a series of short stories that chronicle the speculative evolution of humanity some millions onto billions of years into the future. Starting with the colonization of Mars, where Mars-born humans are lankier and thinner due to the planet's lesser gravity, later leading to a specious civil war between Mars and Earth that would leave hundreds of thousands dead. From here, humanity had genetically modified itself in a desperate attempt to equal the split species, making themselves capable of habiting both planets easily. From here, humanity stretches and seeds out into the stars, establishing an empire across the galaxy. Until, of course, the Reapers, the Q, arrive from dark space. An unstoppable, unwavering, unfeeling species of billion-year-old aliens that are tantamount to gods relative to the human race beneath them. A species with an unmatched technological regime that was intent on passing through the galaxy and genetically modifying the planets they crossed to fit into their more perfect paradise of the universe. And as you might expect, the indomitable human spirit fought back. And for their hubris against such a domineering species, they were punished, out across the stars. All but a few million spacers, in reference to the spacefaring humanity across the stars, were biologically adapted beyond their own will. Most were stripped of their intelligence, their consciousness. Some were turned into fish, others like cavemen with beaked mouths, and many totally unintelligible from the fleshy forms once taken by their ancestors. Some who were left with intelligence were at the same time cruelly stripped of their ability to act on it. Slowly, as evolution resumed course, their knowledge and societies were lost to nature's course of brutish, mindless beasts. Some even going so far as to gain the ultimate ire of the Q. For the rebellion that lasted the longest, the colonials of humanity were transformed into a planet-sized quilt of flesh, mouths, and eyes, with a thinly collected nervous system that allowed this tortured amalgamation of humankind to hold onto their consciousness perhaps the greatest hit against them, as this quilt of meat was forced to be a cleaning set of filter feeders for their Q, subsiding on waste from their benevolent galactic masters. All Tomorrows does have a lighter ending than you might expect, with the Q moving on to torture another galaxy among the stars. These unidentifiable remnants of humanity slowly coming back to become a type of coalition across the Milky Way. A new empire of twisted amalgamations that are an immense far cry from the origins of Soul, with our narrator revealed to be another alien, declaring humanity as we know it extinct, even if the base DNA and biology that spawned all these species remained. Now, even though that is most of it, All Tomorrows is more about the specific small stories of these species rather than the overall narrative. I'd still recommend it for a read. And if you're not a reader, these are like 2 to 4 paragraphs per entry, at least for the PDF version. You can get this out in about an hour, tops. What about that second entry into the world of Biopunk I mentioned earlier? Well, that would be Scorn. If you've never heard of this, Scorn is a video game that came out near the end of 2022 from a Serbian developer. It has its own controversies as far as the development goes, but that's not what I'm here to talk about. Where All Tomorrows is a much more brief story of genetic modification over the course of literal eons, Scorn is a tightly wrapped package that puts the horrors of Biopunk right before your eyes. As a video game, I'll be honest, it was boring as hell, even for a horror game. I played the first 2 or so hours for this video and it did not impress me, but if you're into the slower puzzle horror type of game, I didn't think it was too bad on that front. But above the gameplay, I'd argue the strongest part of Scorn is its art direction, the environment, the ambiance, the characters and the world around you, walls and machines integrated with flesh, steel bones making the framework of such an alien world. Levers that activate with pulleys made of tendons and muscle fibers. The first victim of your escape not being a foul monster but a helpless tool. A person with their body malformed. Presumably made this way so that they could be harvested for parts. Exactly as we do with them. Bodies are no more than the machines of our regular world, easily discarded and replaceable. There is a lot of discussion about what Scorn's meaning is. No official confirmations from the creator, and exactly no dialogue in the game turned this grotesque display of depravity into a box locked tighter than Dark Souls lore. But for today, this does not matter. Scorn, even though it may not be the best game ever made, is Biopunk on full display. A creature that melds with you like a parasite, slowly weaving its tendril-like roots into you, using its arms like your own, doors and walls that move like organs to a larger body, walls of flesh and beings born of cocoons only to be led astray and murdered before they finally reach their end. What do you think of Biopunk? I think I still prefer Dieselpunk for the aesthetic, but I can't lie, in the few weeks of research I've done on this, Biopunk is getting there. I love the very open-ended nature of grotesque horror to be found in these stories. Creatures like the Xenomorph and the Bear from Annihilation being much scarier and cooler concepts than, like, evil Deadpool in your dreams.
Aw, bitch.
It's like a car crash. I just can't seem to pull my eyes away from it, no matter how weird, goofy, or gross that it gets. But that's all for now. Thank you very much for watching. Please remember to like, subscribe, or leave a comment on the video telling me what you thought, and what your favorite examples of Biopunk might be. I will be doing at least one more entry in this kind of punk series. We're going to be covering Demon Punk, which is not real, but we'll be doing it. Anyways, thank you very much for watching once again. Remember to have fun, stay cool, and be awesome. Buster out.